Hi, folks. We're going to allow a couple of more minutes for folks to continue coming in. Devin, can you also see when people are in the waiting room?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. Okay, so one of us will catch it if they keep coming in after we get started here.
Yes.
How was everybody's long day?
Well, it's the end of a long week, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but it seemed like there were a lot of meetings today. So,
Yes, the intensive session is well named, isn't it?
yes.
It's like a New Haven labor camp.
I did tell folks in the STEM group, though, that if you're there in person, you'll be doing lots of walking. So it's no less tiring. Okay, let's see. We've got 18, it looks like. How many are we supposed to have, Devin? Do we know?
No, I don't have but I think it sounds about right. 18 to 20.
Okay. Well,
21.
21. Okay. All right. Shall we go ahead and start, and we'll just bring people in as they come on board. Good afternoon, everybody. It should be afternoon no matter where you are, because it's afternoon even in Arizona. Thanks for joining us at this concluding session. We hope you enjoyed your week. Devin and I are going to facilitate this session where we're going to check in with folks, ask a couple of questions about different things, and give you an opportunity to ask any final questions that you might have. Devin, would you like to start?
Yes. Well, the other thing I want to say is that maybe we'll have you, Karen, just kind of take us through sort of questions that might trigger responses, and I will also monitor the chat. So because we only have a shorter period of time, if anybody wants to just give a brief, either a question, observation, a recommendation, that would be great. I'll monitor that so that we can maybe put them all together.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, well, actually, I do have a few questions written down here. Besides asking everyone about how their week was, we wanted to ask if you all have a better sense of how the seminars work and the roles of the faculty.
We should do a poll, but we won't.
Yeah, so I know you're all.
Sorry. I'll
Please
give an
do.
answer. Since I knew nothing at the beginning of all of this, obviously I know a lot more now than I knew then. And I think it was made fairly clear to us through the way the program of the week was set up for us to understand what would be involved in our directing a seminar, typical way in which to run a seminar, from our being able to observe what was going on in two different ones in 2 different days. One of the issues still open in my mind is whether an institute actually can be set up in Richmond, Virginia, whether or not Virginia Commonwealth University is really willing to put forward the amount of money that would be necessary to get one started, and whether the Richmond Public Schools would be able on, from its end, to do the same kind of thing. So that's probably the biggest question remaining in my mind as to whether we can get something finally going in Richmond. I think there have been people working on it here for 15 or 17 years already. And when one party is ready to go, the other party isn't ready to go. And it's sort of gone back and forth that way. But they think they're getting all the pieces in place now.
That's great, George. Sounds like you all have had some challenges. So I'm hopeful that you can find a way to work those out and get something going. Great, thanks for jumping in. All right, someone else? Ricky, we see you over there. Feel free to, Devin's monitoring the chat, so feel free to participate by chat if that's helpful.
I can jump in and just say, to follow up on George's comments, that I also feel like I have a really good idea of what the seminars look like. But I'd also be curious to know, maybe even in more detail, what faculty can do by way of securing funding, or what the expectations are for faculty roles in securing funding.
That's a great question. I'll answer for myself, and maybe Devin would like to also answer, and as well as anyone else who's already been involved. Eric can also please jump in. For me, I love the idea of the local institute. I'm fully invested in it, and so we developed brochures for our local institute, right? I have them in my car. I have them in my office. I have them in my backpack. I look for opportunities, you never know when you're going to meet someone who might be interested in being a donor. Maybe they can only contribute 10,000 to start with, or maybe they can only contribute 10,000 period, but everything helps, and they might be able to connect you to someone else. You don't know where that golden pot of funding is going to come from. I think Tulsa had was it Tulsa, Eric, who had a terrific donor there for a while. You just don't know where that money's coming from. So be ready to seize any opportunity. And I guess you really have to believe in what you're doing, and want to be able to help. And not all faculty have the time to be invested at that level. Some faculty lead seminars, and that's their involvement. I'm a member of the Executive Advisory Council, our University Advisory Council. And so I do everything I can, help write grants, look for foundation money, support our director in any way that she asks while she's doing fundraising. So there are a variety of different opportunities, and you just have to be ready to seize them. Eric, Devin, would you like to jump in there?
Well, I think Eric will be the best person to at least give us some historical perspective, and also just, get a sense of the national trend and trajectory about funding. The Philadelphia, I came in with an already fully functioning group, and it was already here. And in fact, since I've come, we've procured a more kind of stable funding sources as well. And the director has been very active in that regard. So, but I'm also really curious to hear what what happens when, there's fledgling groups. So maybe Eric can help.
Sure. So, yeah, I think to go to one of Devin's questions is, as you might imagine, I mean, fundraising is always hard. One of the reasons that the institute director is a full-time job is because the brunt of the fundraising work is in their hands, and that's a good chunk of what they do. And so I think what faculty do are basically kind of the support functions that Karen was talking about. And directors are always happy to hear ideas. I mean, they're happy to meet with faculty who have ideas about how to write things into their grants and things like that, if that's a possibility. And I think one of the things freedoms faculty have that the director don't is that we can, the university may not like it, but we can talk to people, right, that we run into, that we do, and we don't have to. We probably should, but we usually don't run it by our development office before we talk to them, and particularly in the kinds of informal encounters that Karen was talking about. I guess also what I would say, and this is kind of circling back to a question that Chris asked a couple of days ago, and that didn't really give ample attention to that, but how do you convince your institution, right, to invest in it? So it's not just outside funders, it's not mainly, particularly at the start, external funding, although ideally that would be nice. But how do you convince your own institution that out of all the many, probably thousands of things that they could invest in, why do this? And the things I always emphasize are to people who are thinking of starting an institute is really pay attention to your institution's priorities, its values, its mission statement, and its strategic plan. And find ways in which a Teachers Institute really matches up with that. I know when we were getting ours going, so University of Delaware is a land grant institution, but it's always not always there. At the time, there was really some disgruntlement among stakeholders outside the institution that we weren't doing enough for the state, right? And so that was at a time when the president was also had a group that was writing a new strategic plan, and so Delaware First was a core part of that, and so we really felt that a Teachers Institute fit well into that, because this is about serving Delaware teachers, Delaware school children, Delaware public education. It's I think probably any institution's strategic plan and values are going to have community outreach as part of it, and so to really we really had to learn to speak the language, to use the buzzwords, if you will, that have been written into the plan, and really kind of hammer those home. And I think that went a long way towards convincing the provost and president that this was worth undertaking. And then once it's in place, then you've got a constituency of faculty, of alumni, potentially, certainly with because you're drawing from local school teachers. So alumni who are teachers who are participating, who can then carry that message forward. I guess the other thing I would say in terms of selling this is, at least for, I don't know how this works with maybe an institution like Yale or Penn, but with the state school, right? One of the arguments we made is this is a way for the University of Delaware to have an impact on what is being taught to the students who will ultimately become our students, right? In-state students. And so it was a way to have, a marginal, but still, I think a meaningful influence on being able to talk to teachers one-on-one and in groups about our expectations and about the kinds of things we would like our students to come in being able to do and prepared to do. So those are just some ideas that I was thinking about. Again, that's less about fundraising from the outside, but about convincing your own institution that this is a worthwhile endeavor.
Thanks, Eric. I think that's very helpful. I'm sorry, Karen, I just wanted to acknowledge Chris, Michael, and Mario. Maybe they can each, I'll begin, this is on my screen, the way the rotation goes. So Chris, please.
Thanks so much. Eric, I think you addressed part of my question, but I was wondering whether Yale might offer some kind of workshop or conversation between faculty and teachers who are trying to set up these institutes. So I'm hearing a lot of really interesting ideas, but I still feel very far from ready to help in a really effective way setting up a local institute in Richmond. And the other is that I'm wondering how you address that sort of tension between this is a teacher, a public school teacher-led initiative, and yet the institute is primarily, from what I understand, housed and funded by the universities, right? So there's, on the one hand, they're coming in and trying to convince the administration with some faculty kind of alongside them, but on the other hand, it's also somehow going to be administered and funded within the university. So I'm just wondering how that works, or I mean, that could be part of the workshop, because I'd love to hear, because I've been very much like taking a backseat. This is my first workshop or initiative thing. So I'm not going to be, plunging ahead when Val has been doing this for, I don't know, 15 years or something, right? But on the other hand, I feel like, okay, well, how can I be helpful in terms of working with the university, the local university in Richmond? So I don't know, I feel a little like it's an odd, like if I step to the side, but if I take it over, I don't know, it just feels like an odd dynamic, and I'm not sure how everyone else has bridged that. So I would love to hear some more about that. And also I don't know how people are managing continuity. I don't know, I just have a lot of questions. And so maybe this should just be part of like a larger workshop or something. I don't know, just like very practical kind of process and organizing type questions.
Thanks, Chris. One thing that we do is take the feedback that we receive from the intensive seminar and fold that into next year's planning. But we can certainly bring that forward to talk about possibly the idea of building in that separate sort of nuts and bolts, is the way I would put it, workshop. But I think that some of Eric's points are really important ones to remember. For example, our dean, or used to be the dean of our college, is now the interim provost. I worked to get her on board to support us right away when I became involved. And any opportunity I had to talk with the president, who is now our former president, I took. So I'm looking forward to talking with the new president. And then, like Eric said, they took the opportunity to look at where the university's interest and the school district's interest intersected with the state's interest. That's how Arizona got a $1.2 million grant from the state of Arizona. So you have to think pretty broadly, right, about how to raise funds. So there's internal building internal relationships, looking for external funding, and looking for funding at the state government level, the county government level, perhaps, all sorts of things. But I do like your idea about a workshop, so we'll make a note of that. Okay, let's go next to Michael. I believe you were next.
So this is the roundtable session. Are you also going to be circulating a survey that we'll be filling out later? Okay, great. So I'll capture.
Yeah.
I'll capture some of my more detailed thoughts there. The first couple of sessions I didn't quite understand, but I think once we got to like that afternoon session on Monday, talking about the roles of the teachers in the two groups, then it got specific enough. It all started to click. So we all came out away really excited. How do you find this mythical creature of a planning director? Right, like they have to be able to do all these things and also be available.
Eric, would you like to jump in there?
Yes, sure. So that it usually the planning director emerges out of someone who has has already been involved in this, but that's not always the case. And so for instance, I don't know that any of the teachers in Richmond or Pittsburgh are interested in becoming the planning director, but that would be a that would be a job search. I mean, it would probably generate internal and external candidates. Y&I would help you in writing the description. Your group would have a lot to do as well. But the people that they've drawn from, so it's been retired teachers, it's been former school administrators, public school administrators. In the case of NAU, it was a faculty member, and so we've run two searches and got dozens of applications, not for planning director obviously, but for director. So and there are things that they're looking for, dedication to public schools, experience with professional development, things like that. So there are certain kinds of specific qualities that would be listed in the ad. In the case of our institution, we had a search committee that the dean put together, because the director's housed in the dean's office, and it was made up of faculty and teachers. I would say one thing I would say based on these questions is to be comfortable and be relieved that a lot of the heavy lifting will be done by the teachers. This may not be the case. For instance, if you're trying to get one started in a place where the teachers have not had a presence at Y&I yet, but certainly in places like San Jose, Richmond, Chicago, the teachers are going to take the lead on this. They're going to find they're going to build the groundswell that then has this happen. I would say that the most important thing that faculty from here can do, if they think this is a worthwhile thing to do, is just go back to your institutions and tell them about this experience. Give them your honest feedback about whether you think it'd be worthwhile to be the institutional partner. And then you can work with your local folks and with Y&I, with Jim and Stephanie, to really do the groundwork, not the groundwork, but the work. And I would say also that in turn, I think the additional workshops and things are a great idea. The Y&I does work with individual places. I mean, they don't just say, bring us your application when you're done. They work with individual places, guide them along the way, provide them with templates and information. For San Jose, I've been there a couple of times and two or three times by camera. So that, you know, we have run information sessions and workshops at individual sites.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, and next we're going to go to Mario.
Thanks, Karen. So I guess I can, let's assume this is what's happening at Oklahoma State, right? So let's assume that we were able to do the fundraising and then we were able to do all of the other stuff. One thing that seems to not get through to the higher ups is they actually say like, oh, teachers, get education involved. But and they're not gonna read this thing, right? I understand why it's arts and science that is supposed to be doing this and not rely on anything from education. But I think that maybe education will get that, and then they think that it's part of their call to be part of it too. And I don't think that it's a good idea either to have them involved, but can you give us some valuable information to how do we convince the higher ups that actually this is not an education college issue?
Well, I'll take a stab at that first. I would say remind them that this is about deepening the fellows' content knowledge, not teaching them how to teach. So generally, departments of ed, colleges of ed, it's about teaching people how to teach and pedagogy and all of the things that go along with being a teacher. What we're doing in this case is something very different, which is increasing a fellow's content knowledge, giving them deep content knowledge on a subject from a variety of topics in the humanities, social sciences, and the sciences and mathematics, right? And a Department of Education cannot do that because that's not what they do, right? And so I would say, try and perhaps get a one-to-one meeting or get your group together, your group of faculty, go in with a plan and try and sit down and talk with, when you say the higher ups, I don't know if you mean the provost and the president. Yeah. And just meet with them, have as you say, they're not going to read that whole thing, right? So have a very succinct presentation laid out with these 2 or 3 points that really lays out the distinction of content knowledge versus teaching teachers how to teach, to try and get that across. In our case, we didn't have trouble convincing the administration. We had trouble convincing our College of Ed. They wanted in, right? And so we had to smooth some ruffled feathers, convince them that we weren't trying to do what they did, and explain exactly why it is that Yale doesn't want education professors leading seminars, right? Devin, Eric, anyone else want to take a stab at that?
No, I think that was very thorough. I mean, I think that it's a broader problem, isn't it, to really identify what the culture of the place is, and specifically what the objections or the potential obstacles might be, and then to work with it, work with that. But that again would be helpful to have a series of those strategies sort of mapped together so we can actually use them. Before we, I don't know if Michael has another question. I just wanted to give Chris the opportunity to ask a question from the chat. I think I misunderstood it, but I think you were asking about the kind of setting up the institute above and beyond. Do you want to say anything, or has it been answered?
Well, this will happen in that, fantasy workshop, but the question is just if, like in the absence of a director or any kind of formalized structure, so you're trying to build out a local institute. So people who are just passionately committed, just devote the time and the resources and write grants. And like if your university can't, promise you a line with certain kinds of resources for the local institute, then committed faculty start raising funds on their own and use Yale's name, or they just go off on their own in collaborating with teachers. I'm just wondering how that piece works, and you just do that on your own time, just out of commitment to the initiative.
Well, we started with a group of teacher fellows who wanted us to get an institute going, right? And then we had some faculty who were interested, and once we found out what it was, we invited some more faculty, and then we went to Yale with our teacher fellows. So we formed this ad hoc committee, and yes, we just counted it as part of our service. And we continued to work until we got to go to Yale and made the decision we do want to form a local institute. And then we started a formal planning process with Yale. And that actually helped quite a lot when we started a planning process, because as Eric and Devin said, they'll give you some templates, they'll provide you suggestions and resources. And it's a place to start, right? And our planning director came from that pool of that ad hoc faculty group. Anyone else want to jump in and add to that?
Yeah, Eric?
No, no.
Oh, okay.
I think that was well said.
Yeah, but I mean, we can get back to that. I'm sure the conversation might, steer back around to that. There's been an interesting sort of little sidebar chat in the chat about the faculty that gets, of not only how the advisory board might select faculty to do seminars, local seminars, but also whether it is something that experienced faculty have found or to be valuable for their own professional development, especially if they're pre-tenure. So I'm wondering if Karen, Eric have something to say about that. My own thought would be that it's something which obviously it probably wouldn't hurt in most cases, unless it was an obstacle to you're doing the other stuff. I think Michael's suggesting, he has to write grants and that sort of thing, which his department prioritizes. But anyway, that's something to think about.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead, Karen.
No, please jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that I've been fascinated by that thread because I think it raises, some fundamental questions. I mean, what we've been asking about how, why would the institution invest in this as opposed to something else? I think that's a question for everyone that's going to be potentially involved, right? I mean, there are teachers who are not going to be involved with the local institute or the national, for that matter, because they have other priorities, either professional or personal. It's the same with faculty who are involved. There's some great people on our campus that I've approached about being involved, but they've demurred because they have other things other priorities. And so, yeah, I mean, this is something that everyone has to decide about. Promotion and tenure criteria are just so different across institutions, and what counts and what doesn't. That I think, Michael's advice that we really need to be sure this is something that would be valued, particularly if you're junior faculty. But beyond that, you know, it's where does this fit in what you want to, well, what you want to accomplish. You know, I regard it kind of as service, and I get to count a little bit of my involvement as service because it is a university function, but in terms of workload, but certainly doesn't, at least in years where I'm leading a seminar, the percentage doesn't cover, you know, the amount of time I spend on it.
I think Sandra has wants
Yeah,
to make an observation.
Yeah, I had a question about that. So in terms of faculty commitment and time, is there a model whereby seminars can be led by a team of faculty? I mean, it seems like every local seminar is a single faculty director, right?
We did two because I was traveling for like 1 or 2 things. So I had another Astro faculty who was also involved. So we kind of tag team a little bit. So it's possible to do it with team of faculty, at least at Delaware. We split the stipend in half.
Oh, okay. Yes, from what I understand also, I think that's something which there is a kind of a local discretion in the local institute that can, depending on the nature of the seminar, the, you know, the workload, et cetera.
Because my understanding in Philadelphia was you had to have one lead faculty. So a lot of faculty were interested in doing, you know, a third of it kind of thing, and would have probably done it without pay for a third of it, right? So, but I thought that we were told there had to be one lead faculty.
Well, I think it's under discussion because I think that was something that we were discussing, but it's something which has to be, you know, I still think that each local advisory board is thinking through that process to see if it'll be, you know, if it'll be too clunky.
Right.
These are all great questions. All right, have we addressed everybody's who's had their hand up so far? Great, because I have another question for you all. Now that you've been through the week and we started with telling you about the various different articles or some of the various articles, and then you got to observe the national seminars. Are you getting a sense of why these articles exist and how important they are? And do you have questions specifically about the articles? Because I can tell you when you're writing, if you go to write a proposal for local, you will have to definitely adhere to those articles and make it clear in your proposal how you are doing so.
I think it might be useful just to remind everybody about the articles. Maybe there's a certain sense of amnesia after this week, after this long week. But I think some of them dealt with, if you recall, the faculty roles in the seminar, the role of the teaching fellows and how the interaction goes, aspects about the curriculum unit. So I think these were the majority of the articles, yes? And I think we've already dealt with the other one about starting the institute.
Well, and collaboration, how important it is that it's a collaboration between the institution and the teachers, right? Any questions about that? Yes, I know we've probably discussed ad nauseum, but I just wanted to be sure.
Ricky's raising a question about whether the articles are, I assume the articles, and I assume that I'm trying to interpret the question, but the procedure, I mean, is the question that to what extent are the articles relevant to the starting up the institute, or more for once the institute's in motion, how to deal with it, right? Is maybe I'm misunderstanding the question.
I may be wrong, but I think she's just clarifying that when you say articles, you're talking about the understandings
Oh,
and
right.
procedures, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can, Ricky. Amazing.
Yeah, I was just trying to reference the articles that you were talking about. And the one I have is understandings and procedures necessary for a teacher's institute. Is that the one?
Yes, we had the Article 8 on collaboration. There was one about they were all linked in the program that Stephanie sent out. And we went over most of them on Monday and some of them on Tuesday.
Some of them involve, of course, also things like, remuneration, right? We were discussing how much, what the standard sort of compensation for these things are on all the ends, right? Of the teaching fellows. So I think there was a lot of information to integrate, but if you have integrated some of it and are still like kind of fuzzy about it and would like to kind of just bring it up, it's a good time for that.
And while you're all thinking about that, let me ask the next question and you can answer them in any order. What was most helpful about observing the national seminars these last few days?
Well, we talked about this
Assuming
in
that
our,
was helpful.
yeah, we
Yes.
talked about this in our Philly group last night. Ricky and I both commented, we actually had no idea what we were expected to do. And, so we signed on and I wasn't, I know where I was told to mute and to not show our video, but I wasn't sure if I was taking notes or putting questions in the chat. I mean, it wasn't clear what we were supposed to get out of it. I mean, I got a lot out of it subject matter wise, and it was an interesting style of teaching. And when I understand that really was to see how its seminars run differently.
Okay, so you think we should make that more clear before people go in to observe what the expectations are?
Yeah, and for me also, the difference in the level of engagement, and someone pointed this out to me later, right, between what my local seminar was like last spring versus this national seminar. I mean, it was just night and day, right? The fellows in this national seminar, I mean, were on point, knew their material in detail. I mean, high level questions. But I understand it's a select group. It's, over the summer, they were given the readings in May. So I just didn't know any of the backstory. So watching that, I was a little bit confused about what was going on.
Okay, thank you for that. Sarah raised her hand.
I just wanted to offer that I was so grateful to see in both seminars I observed the fellows engage with each other and each other's work at such a high level. And Sandra, to your point, there was some discussion this morning about sort of the difference between the national and the local level of engagement. But I mean, if this is what is an example of what might be possible, even a smidgen of it at the local level, I think it felt really, it felt very much like a worthwhile goal to strive toward for our local community. So I very much appreciated seeing that.
Before there's a question in the chat, but also for Michel to make his observation and for question. The one thing that we also discovered, of course, I think Sarah was in the session with David. I'm sorry, with I think it was Chris. No, just this one that we just were at today, which is Francis's session. That the national. I'm sorry. I'm talking I'm not, I wasn't with you, Sarah, I was another one, Michelle. But the national seminars are different from the local seminars, in some very important ways. So, one being, of course, that there's a kind of interview process and a certain kind of direct connection with the subject, right? Which sometimes we may not have at the local level. So that's something to consider, that these sessions are meant to be good models and templates to see how things are done, but there will be differences on the local level, which will, what you observe may not be a model as such, so that's something what I want to put out there. Michelle?
Yeah, like Sarah, I thought it was very helpful to get a better sense of what I think is a pretty big difference between the local institutes and the national institutes. Thinking, if I were to prepare a seminar, I think the big difference for me was that not only are the fellows at the National Institute they come prepared, they actually have to submit already a proposal with a sort of a topic already in mind. Whereas I think at the local level, my sense is that one of the key goals of the seminar leader is to help the fellows develop a topic for a curriculum unit, which means also, the whole issue of deadlines is, I think, very different, because choosing a topic is not an easy thing, and it should come from them, right? It's not us. But what I found most helpful, I found that really helpful. The seminars themselves, what I found really helpful was because the fellows come, it's K-12, right? So I imagine I'm not a K-12 teacher, but I assume that the students in a kindergarten are very different than in 12th grade. And so I was curious to see how does this work? Me as a faculty, let's say I teach on US imperialism. How will that work? And so what I found really helpful today in Ian's seminar, which is on democracy and equality, he had the seminar start with just two fellows. I guess he does that all the time. Each session have two fellows just present where they are with their curriculum unit. And both of them were fourth grade teachers. And not to take a lot of time, but the one that really struck me was about food, about how, food deserts, and how she was going to translate what she had learned in, doing the readings, in the Ian seminar, including parts of his book, which I imagine fourth graders would have a hard time chewing, even though he's a great writer. I thought it was wonderful the way, that gave me a better sense of why it would make sense for someone like me to teach about US imperialism, even if the fellows are not necessarily 12th grade teachers, but maybe even, come from elementary school. And I think, having that kind of exposure, I think would be helpful. I mean, Devin, you were in the seminar yesterday with David, which was great, but there was more about talking about the second half, particularly talking about how to talk about difficult issues. But this one today was really concrete. I got a much better sense of how I, as a university professor, who would be who'd be more, I'm the expert, the content expert, I'm not the pedagogical expert, how my presence in a seminar would be nonetheless valuable.
Thank you so much for those comments. Others?
Can I say something? Sorry. So I think, I think, Michelle, those are some great points. One thing I would say is that when fellows apply for their for a local institute, they do include a paragraph where they talk about what topic they plan to do for their curriculum unit. Now that certainly gets fleshed out and perhaps changed. Sometimes the topic completely changes, but more often it just gets fleshed out once they start doing the readings, listening to the discussions, and have their meetings with you. But they do come in with some idea about what they'd like to write about. The other point I was making is that's one reason why and I gives you the opportunity to observe 2 seminars is because everyone has a different style. And so you can see, you know, what works best for you, what's working well that you may not have thought of, and to see it in 2 different contexts. And I do apologize for us not communicating better what the role of faculty is. It's an odd one for faculty, right? Which is basically to sit back and be quiet. But part of it is, when this is on campus, you know, you're in the room with the fellows and with the seminar leader, and usually the seminar leader will tell you what their personal preference is. And I think the turn off the cameras and microphone thing was just sort of for the ease of how do you manage this virtual. But I'm sorry that wasn't better communicated.
Yeah, and I agree with Eric. Michelle, you will not have any problem having people picking a topic in most instances. Sometimes it will be more, like I said in one session earlier today, trying to help them narrow it down into something that will fit into one curriculum unit, because enthusiasm bubbles over, and sometimes you'll have folks wanting to do something so broad it could be 3 or 4 curriculum units. But I haven't found that lack of knowing what to write about is a problem. Other comments along those lines?
I think Ricky had her hand up.
Oh, Ricky, I'm sorry. I didn't see that.
I'm going in and out, so forgive me if I go out. I attended, Michelle, the same session that you spoke about just now with Ian. And at that point, I had finally gotten a sense of what I was supposed to be looking for and doing. So it was a bit early, it was a bit easier than the first session I attended. But one of the things I found interesting was, as I listened to his presentation, I was struck by how complicated, how difficult, how it was just very complicated with the number of graphs and with the arguments about risk tolerance and loss aversion and all of those concepts. And I was struggling as I was listening to it. I was struggling trying to figure out, boy, I would really like to see what the teachers are going to do with this, with that specific information, because it was very, very complicated, intriguing, but very complicated. And for me, and I think I've mentioned, it's the translation process that intrigues me, how the teachers move from, say, theory, grand theory, big ideas, to boots on the ground. And what he was talking about was very complicated. And yeah.
Can I add a quick question to Ricky, your comment, which is, does anyone else have any kind of hesitation about having that much power? I mean, so you give a seminar and then all these people are going to devise like model curriculum that are going to be sent out to their entire grade and the whole school system. Or, I mean, it's not just that I would have that I doubt myself, but also I wonder what it means for single faculty to be able to influence curriculum in that way, especially in certain kinds of fields where the stakes are very, very high, approaches to particular subjects and to reading materials. And I was in I was in a seminar where we had some reading where I was very curious to know how people were reading this reading that I found deeply problematic. But then I guess I don't know, the reading got changed and there was some confusion. So we never really got to that, but it got me thinking about what it might mean to have faculty be guiding an entire unit for so many classes across a school system.
Right.
For me, and this was my first time doing it, it was very, very scary. And it was so scary. I think I was overzealous, and I think I might have not demanded too much, because they could certainly, they ended up doing it, but I was just, because I was fearful. One, it has kind of my name on it. It has their name on it, but more importantly, these are students who are going to be taught this information. I wanted it to be rock solid. And yeah, having that much power, I mean, you really don't. But the possibility that you do was very, very daunting.
Well, you both bring up good points, and I would encourage anyone who's concerned about the translational aspect of something very complicated or something that seems to be way above certain grade levels to go and look at both national and local units that have been produced. So look in, I don't know what the deadline is for the nationals, but look after it's published, Ricky, and see how some of the fellows have translated Ian's seminar into a curriculum unit. I would also say, look at some of the units that came out of the Dene Institute on native law, which was, we had a faculty member who had those same concerns. I've got a third grade teacher. How are they going to translate this for elementary school? And look at the units that came out of there. I'm constantly amazed at how the fellows are able to take that information and turn it into something that's grade level appropriate. And they do it time and time again. As to the question of power, I'll leave that one up for discussion by the group. I just try and present the information best I can and make sure that what goes out is accurate, because as you said, Ricky, it has our names on it, and that's our job, is to make sure that the content is accurate, right? The content that they've included in there is accurate.
I'm gonna have to step away, but I just, and I've got all kinds of questions I'll put in the survey, but I'll just say, this part of the conversation, I think maybe makes it clear for me how important the collaborative principle or whatever it is, because I guess I come to this concern about translation and power from the other end, right? Which is that if we really mean it when we say that we're all experts together, why it should be our job to be the translators and the ones to visualize what that looks like, and to feel that we have, ownership over what the content is and how it's going to be translated, especially now that we've seen some seminars where one of the things that I thought was really wonderful and compelling was, they had these like long reading lists that were completely separate, as far as I could tell, from what they were reading, right? So they were thinking about how they were going to engage their units. They were then going out and finding sources that they wanted to engage with more so that they could figure out exactly how they were going to do that translation. So I don't know if that's new. I have young kids and I have volunteered in their classroom, and I've had it made very apparent to me that as a result of that is not my calling in life. So I just am so 100% certain that's not my area of expertise, and simultaneously that it is for others.
Oh, thank you so much, Erica. That was a great
It was
comment.
nice to see you all. Yeah, I'm sorry I have to duck away, but this has been really great, and I guess more to come.
Before our time runs out, I think I want to acknowledge Shannon and Joel to kind of make their observations as well.
Yes.
I posted mine in the chat. I think, Ricky, you bring up a great point, but I think it's also the problem that classroom teachers struggle with in terms of power over making sure the students learn what they want them to learn correctly and well and all that. And I think we actually have to give up some of our own power and realize they're going to internalize what we teach them and create units oftentimes in ways that maybe I might think they should do this, that, or the other. And for me, I'm not trying to get everybody up to here, but wherever they come in at, I'm just trying to help them a little bit, help them grow in their understanding and knowledge. And so in some sense, I think we have to give up power also over controlling what they create and what they do with our input and in how they create that output.
Great comment. And was it Mario? Who was the other person?
Joel.
Yeah, so
Joel.
I was gonna say something similar, in that, you know, in my experience, when it comes to the curriculum units, including the content knowledge in the curriculum unit, it's really much more so the fellow that has the power, more so than me, right? So my experience more often than not has been, you know, whatever, we'll start out with some general topic. First couple of seminars, I'm providing a lot of the content. The fellows figure out sort of what they want to do fits in within that umbrella. And then they start talking about their curriculum units. And, you know, then either what I am presenting as content shifts, or they are presenting the content rather than I am, right? So just examples to highlight, right? So I'm an inorganic chemist. One seminar series I gave was on, you know, what makes up the world around us. There were art teachers in that seminar. One art teacher basically, you know, developed a unit around, you know, different things you can do with glue. So part of the content was, you know, what is the chemistry of glue that makes glue the way it is? That is not something that I necessarily had in my seminar series as something to talk about. It's not also something necessarily that I knew really well going in, right? So then the challenge for me, which is why, you know, this is a great experience, but it is work, is, you know, I actually had to look at the chemistry of glue. I knew a little bit about the chemistry of glue, but not necessarily enough to be able to sign off on the content in that curriculum unit. And that's just one example, right? So yeah, the fellows are really the ones with the power. You know, my experience has always been the umbrella is a jumping off point, and they take that umbrella in all kinds of different directions. And I've always wound up learning an awful lot every seminar I've run.
Great. Thank you so much, Joel. And thank you, Eric, and for your comment in the chat. I agree with both points. This has been a fantastic discussion. And thank you also to our co-facilitator, Devin Patel, and to Eric for all your work this week. We want to thank you all so much for joining us this week and encourage you to fill out that survey, the evaluation that Stephanie sends out. It also will have, you also have all of our email addresses. If you have any questions that didn't get answered this week, please feel free to reach out to any one of us. Sorry, Eric and Devin, that I just volunteered you. But do reach out to us and let us know how we can be of help if we can. And we wish you all a pleasant rest of the week. And thanks again for all of your time and your great thoughts this week.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I
Thank
can't wait
you.
to meet you, Devin.
As well, all of you.
Bye now. Okay. Bye, Eric.